Welcome to SIS Stories. This is Miss Bacigalupo's English 10 class, storytelling under the theme, Enter, Return. This is Josie's story. Listen to her talk about identity as she shares an experience that depicts strength and growth.
Where are you from? This is a question that I'm often asked, but I always have to pause before answering as a third culture kid. So the first page of my passport says that it's property of the government of Canada. But on the page with my photo, where it says name of holder, is printed my name in pinyin, proof that I'm also Chinese. So I know this may sound a bit stereotypical, but with foods, I prefer soy sauce over maple syrup. But when it comes to sports, I'd pick skiing over badminton. And I've also been given red packets for New Year's instead of presents on Christmas for as long as I can remember. And yet, I've spent the majority of my 15 years living in Canada. So, what does all this make me? Chinese or Canadian? Today, I'll be sharing with you some of the experiences that have helped me find my answer. So, the beginning of my life as a Canadian went a little like this. I was seriously sleep deprived from my jet lag, and I had dark circles so huge they hung onto my cheekbones when I followed my principal up the staircase, down the hallway, and through the doorway of my new classroom. At first, his large frame sheltered me from what was to come inside. Okay, deep breath, I told myself. He steps aside, and immediately, I felt like a lamb amongst wolves. I was up for slaughtering. Meet your new class, he says, with a huge smile plastered on his face. And yet, all 6-year-old me could notice at the moment was the way that the fluorescent lights above were mirrored onto the center of his head, where it was as smooth and hairless as the surface of an egg. And this observation made me smile a little, but still, I felt the 20 pairs of slitted eyes latch onto me, and I'm forced to look down at my feet. I remembered tracing the pattern on the carpet with my eyes, my heart pounding, and my esophagus clenched tight. The carpet was dark navy in color and freshly vacuumed, and it had skull-colored dots swirled around in lines. It was then September, and I was wearing my winter uniform, which consisted of a white dress shirt, a striped tie, a kilt, knee-high socks, and a pair of flats. And I felt the collar of my shirt cut into my neck and the tie restricting my breathing. And I couldn't tell if it was from the pain or sheer fear, but I felt tears gather in my eyes and threatened to overspill from the brims. My hands crept to my sides, and my fingers found the hem of my kilt, and they tugged onto the hanging threads as if they were my lifeline. It was my last straw. I can't do this, I remember thinking to myself. And for the first days of school, I would watch the other kids as they sat around in groups and chatted or ran around chasing each other, and feeling so lost and so out of place, I would pray for the ground to just open up and swallow me whole. And on these days, home was my only refuge. And only within the safety of the walls of my room would I feel safe and protected again. After school, I would eagerly wait for my mom to come pick me up and take me away from this horror of a nightmare filled with kids. And since rain season in Vancouver is pretty much all year round, I would be greeted with skies so dark I couldn't tell the time of the day, and empty streets with only cars and their tinted windows on my way home. As soon as I got home, I would navigate a maze of cardboard boxes and half-constructed IKEA furniture and head straight for my room. And once there, I would throw myself onto the bed and sink into my sheets and burying myself under pillows. And there I would lie, listening to the sound of rain splattering against my window outside. And occasionally, I would hear the sound of my parents' dreadful music floating up from downstairs. Then I would close my eyes and let the waves of fatigue and sadness drown over me. And this was how I spent the first few months of my life in Canada. Not out in nature, making friends, doing sports, or anything else that I should have been doing, but instead, I was caged up at home in bed. I know, pathetic. But thankfully, this darkness was only temporary. And one morning, as I knotted my tie with newfound ease and placed it around my neck before sitting down for breakfast, I ran through the events of this coming week in my mind. I had school, homework, piano classes, conferences, winter camp, and a sleepover at my friend's. This was now all so familiar to me, and it was as easy and simple as breathing. Days, weeks, and months had passed by, and I was now comfortable in my once new surroundings. Canada was now home to me. However, no matter how long I lived there or how much I loved it, I found that I could never quite let go of my identity as Chinese. It was when I moved back to China that I finally knew it was impossible to choose only one identity for myself. When I felt the hot, humid air on my skin, heard the loud, fluent Mandarin spoken all around me, and saw the familiar faces of my family that I knew. While Canada was now my home and my nationality, China was still part of my culture. It was my ethnicity, and it was a huge part of me. Oh, I had found that the answer to the dilemma that has troubled me for years is simply both. I was both Canadian and Chinese. And over time, I have learned to fully embrace and celebrate this, as well as find pride in it. Thank you.